Okay. Yeah, good morning. As Chris said, I'm Tim DiCarlo. I'm the Registrar of Voters for the City of Waterbury. Currently on my 12th year of being a registrar. And I took over this class several years ago because, mainly because of the predicament when I came in. My predecessor did not want me in the office. She wanted somebody else to be a registrar. So when I got there, I found a red pen and a blue pen. And everything else was shredded and destroyed, and I had to literally learn from scratch how to do the job. And actually, it brought my counterpart and I very close together at that point because without her, I couldn't even have done the job. So I know what it's like. I know we've had a lot of turnover in the last year and a half. Somewhere over the range, over 110 registrars have taken office since last year into now. And so what we're going to cover today basically is what it is that your job is, as well as getting ready for the August primary that's fastly approaching. So, all right, so the first question that people get all the time, especially when they take the job, excuse me, is what do registrars actually do? And registrars are not Santa. We're not up in the North Pole. Only come out once a year to run the election and then go back and hibernate. There are all sorts of responsibilities that we have throughout the whole year. There's 4 types of elections: presidential, state, municipal, referenda, and primaries. If you're a larger city, referenda may not be something that you're familiar with or even participate in. I know in Waterbury we don't, but here in Vernon I know they do. You're going to register all voters. You have to take care of the registry list and all of the ballots, both before they're cast and then after they're cast. You are in charge of overseeing absentee voting in the form of supervised balloting and on counting on that day. You've got to make sure that all of the voting technology is taken care of. You have maintenance contracts, and you have to make sure everything's serviced and tested prior to each election. You have to administer an election day registration for general elections in November, which, depending on the size of your municipality, it really could be a giant task. You oversee every aspect of the election from from the moment that the primary petition pages come in to when you're going to finish with the recanvassing of an election. We have post-election audits. We have the recanvassing, or is also basically a fancy word for a recount. And you have to keep on top of all the training and records. So there's a lot here. It's not that you show up once a year and conduct an election. So the resources that are available to registrars is ROVAC, which is the Registrar of Voter Association. We have 2 conferences a year. We also have county meetings, and we're really the association in which registrars can kind of lean on each other for guidance. Then there's Secretary of State's office, and that's where you're going to find your legal opinions. Anytime you need anything that a written directive or anything of that nature, we always say you're going to want to get it in writing from the Secretary of State's office. They're also going to be the ones that supply you with all of your office supplies such as voter registration cards, election posters, envelopes for same-day voter registration and for other types. Oops, move fast. And
Sorry.
that's all right. And whatnot. We can. So, and this is all going to be online. So you'll be able to get this slide afterwards. I don't want everybody just sitting there trying to rewrite this whole thing. So I'm going to start to go fast a little bit if I haven't already. So the ROVAC board is broken up. We have a president, executive vice president, secretary, and treasurer, and then you have your county chairs, which Melissa Russell is the county chair in Litchfield County, Fred DeCaro in Fairfield, Darlene Burrell in Hartford, Bonnie Anderson in Middlesex, myself for New Haven County, Jeff Rogers in New London County, Christine Pappas in Collin County, and Laureen Hagan is Wyndham County. So,
Is that better
what's wrong?
for people? I'm just hearing it. They're getting a lot of static. Only two people have told me that, but is that any better? I switched the microphone. Okay. Oh, sorry.
All right, and this is, I mean, a lot of this is just for your own information. The ROVAC committees and chairs, conference chairs, Lauren Olson, Melissa Russell's education, technology, Elizabeth Becker. I take over legislation. Sue Burnham is ways and means, handbook, Darlene Burrell. Budget is Annalisa Stravata. Certification is Anne Marie Mastriani, and Ann Kilby is in charge of the audit. What's wrong now?
I don't know what happened. My screen changed.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry.
The two state agencies that you're going to be working the most with is going to be the Secretary of State's office and election enforcement. Their contact information is here. And so the first thing that once you take office, you have 2 years from the date of taking office to become certified through the Yukon City program. Some of you may already started it. Some of you may already be certified. But as of once this program went into effect in I don't even remember now. I think it was 2015 or 2016. The town is responsible for payment. You are not responsible. The last check, it was $1,600 for the entire course from start to finish. And your municipality by law is required to reimburse or to cover the full cost. The sections are here. There's 8 sections. And then there is the final exam, which has always been open book. And as of 2020, the classes are now virtual instead of in person, because those that did it first, we all had to go to all the campuses, and that's no longer the case. You know, the next one.
Thank goodness.
All right, so when I sit down and I put this whole thing together, it's hard for me to figure out what's more important, to start with the big up and coming primary or to go into the responsibilities of registrar. So we kind of just jumped around a little bit. So we covered the beginning stuff is just standard boilerplate. Those are just the people that you need to reach out to when you have questions about ROVAC, election enforcement, or elections through Secretary of State. And all of that information's there. But what I want to get into right now is the actual deadlines that are coming up. And we're going to go from this starting in June 14th, going to the August primary. So the August 9th primary. The first thing is, if you received any district primaries, a district is different than a municipal office. So registrars are considered municipal. If your state rep district is encompassed entirely in your town, it is considered municipal. If it borders other towns and goes into other towns, then it's considered a district. So for example, I have the 72nd district in Waterbury is totally encompassed in Waterbury. The 71st district is Middlebury, Waterbury. So that is considered a district. If I had primary petitions that were submitted to my office for both districts, the 72nd district would be going to my town clerk because it's municipal, and the 71st would be going to the Secretary of State's office because it's a district. So if you received any, even if the candidate did fail to receive the amount that they needed, we did have that in Waterbury in one of our state Senate seats. They needed 1,026 signatures. They handed in 180. Those 180 still have to be verified. The backs of the forms have to be filled out by the registrar and then sent to Secretary of State's office for processing. Even if they didn't make it, you still have to submit it. So the deadline to do that is the 14th. So if anyone, and I know folks over in the first congressional all received a lot of petitions that came through. So you need to get those into the Secretary of State's office by next week. If they don't make it, they don't count. And then you've got a big issue on your hands. So that's the first thing, first deadline. And these are all in the Secretary of State's calendar. So you can just, follow through on that, looking at it on there as well. July 8th is going to be the last day to determine the location of your polling places
and the certification of the polling places to the Secretary of State's office. So if you're still in the process of figuring out where you're going to put your polling places, that you've got to get everything put together on or before July 8th. And if the election management system, the EMS system is working, which is a big if, you need to have everything in there and update it. And we'll get into a little of that in a little while. July 8th is also, you have to have have certified the locations to the Secretary of State. I took the wording right out of the calendar. So sometimes it's, I put them in there. It's a little confusing just because they sound similar, but a lot of it has to do with district versus municipal, which is what I just went over.
It's also worth noting that if you attempt to do this right now, it isn't going to work. The Secretary's office is aware of that and working on it because I attempted to do so last week. And it's an issue in EMS. They're working on getting that fixed, and it should hopefully be fixed shortly. But don't try to just finish the class today and go in and do that, because you're not going to have any luck doing so.
Okay, so if you're having a local primary, so if you're having a primary for state rep, state senate, if you're having it for registrar of voters, candidates that are running have the right to give you a list of their desired party moderators and people to work on the election in the polling place that day. So if I was a state rep and I'm running, I'm challenging somebody for state representative, I could give to the registrar on or before July 18th a list of people I would prefer to work. Now they have to be, first off, if I want people that are moderators, they have to be certified moderators. I just can't give a list of people. And you have to accept the list. You don't have to actually accept the poll workers. So I had a few years ago, we had a long time ago actually, we had this happen where it was a municipal primary, and the folks came in with a list of people that they wanted to work, and my counterpart it was for their party, and she decided that even though they were our regular poll workers, she was using the people that always worked at that poll. It's as simple as that. You have to accept it. You don't have to take you don't have to actually take their people. Maybe it works out that you're down poll workers, and maybe you end up with a poll worker for a long time, but it is your prerogative as to who you take. The July 18th is also the last day for registrars to designate in writing to the town clerk whether or not you're going to be doing centralized voting of your absentees and where that location is going to be. If you count your absentees at the polls, then you don't have to do this. But if you are going to do centralized counting of your absentees, by law, July 18th, the town clerk needs to know, because the town clerk needs to make a notice of that. July 19th is when yourselves and your town clerks it's the deadline to certify your ballot order with Secretary of State's office. So how many are you ordering for your primary? You're going to be doing that again. If EMS is working, you're going to be doing it through EMS. They're coming up with a lot of patches to try to save the system. But I mean, I'm just honest. I don't know if that system's going to be working on August 9th. So we'll touch on that a little bit too.
And it's worth noting that, yes, July 19th, you have to certify with them your ballot order, but your ballot order will have already been submitted several weeks before this, because the absentee ballots have to be available 31 days before. So.
Right. So, and like I said, these are just I'm just following the election calendar. So July 11th to the 20th is notice of the July 26th registration session must be noticed in the newspaper. So what does that mean? On July 26th, there's going to be a voter registration session. In between the time of July 11th through the 20th, you're going to need to put out a notice to your newspaper telling them that you're that you're going to be holding it. Do we still send them?
Yeah, I've actually already set up the not the legal notice. There's a blast that I send out to the media. So if you have a local newspaper, please let me know who your contact is there. Send me an email. and I will send it out. But yes, this is automatically going to go into the newspaper for the primary and the election.
What I tell everybody is, ROVAC does send this out, and it is helpful because it will generally land in a majority of the newspapers. That does not mean it's definitely going to land in your local newspaper. So it doesn't hurt to do it twice. So let ROVAC do it and do it yourself, because this is state law. And if you have somebody, I think all of us have a fun person who is very active and in our towns and know more than we do, and loves to go out and complain and cause issue. If they file an SEC complaint, well, you're in violation if you just sit back and hope that it's going to show up. So ROVAC for the last several years have been trying to change the law on this. We have not been successful yet. I'm hoping next year we are, but as of right now, it is your responsibility. Although ROVAC will help you, but it is your responsibility to make sure that that notice shows up at least once between the 11th and the 20th of July for the session. We'll get into what the session is in a little bit. Well, in a little bit, it's already arrived. So July 26th. July 26th is the mandatory enrollment session to be held 14th day before the primary for the purpose of registration and enrollment. So at this point, it's going to be folks that are new to your town or are unaffiliates. You're not going to be able to switch from any of the minor parties or major parties. So you can't switch at this point Democrat, Republican, and have party privilege and be able to vote. You can't switch Libertarian, Independent Party, Working Families Party, or Green Party to a Democrat or Republican and have access to the ballot on the 9th. It doesn't work that way. There's a 90-day waiting period, and that waiting period that was back in March. So we've already gone past that. So this is going to be just for folks that are new to the town, turning 17, that are 17, that will be 18 on election day, and anyone who is an unaffiliated voter. And so you have to have it at least 2 consecutive hours between the period of noon and 9 p.m. The one thing you're going to hear me say all the time is unless there's an exception to the rule. There's always an exception to the rule. And if your population is over 25,000, then the session has to be any 2 hours between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. So every time we go through everything, you'll think it's cut and dry, and then there's the exception to the rule. So the 26th, 2 hours from noon to 9, unless you're 25,000, and then it's any 2 hours between 5 and 9.
So just choose 2 hours between 5 and 9 and you're covered.
And the reality is, and I know that, and a lot of these deadlines when we have to be open, there's several times the offices need to be open. I know a lot of registrars are part-time that work full-time in other jobs. The office has to be open. So if you can't make it, your deputy can always fill in. If your deputy cannot make it, you could have an assistant registrar. The reality is the office has to be open. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be there. It would be ideal if you could be, but the reality is that it has to be open. So some towns stagger it during the day when we have these open sessions. And one registrar and a deputy are in, and then another registrar and a deputy are in. Sometimes the Republican registrar is in with the Democratic deputy, and then vice versa, just to make sure that it's covered, it's all, and the office is open. But you can have somebody fill in and substitute for you. All right, August 2nd, the registrars may begin the cross off of absentees. So if you are, all the absentees that are in at this point, you can start crossing them off your official voters list and going through with that. August 4th is going to be the enrollment cutoff. So this is the mail-in. And this is the deadline for registering and or enrolling. So what does all this mean? Mail-in is considered online voter registration. It is considered dropping off for somebody else. So if I had one for Chris Prue, a voter registration card for Chris Prue, I brought it in, that is considered mail-in. The actual United States Postal Service is mail. And then everything else, which is just is considered in person, and that is literally that, showing up in person, and we haven't gotten to that deadline yet. So everything must be received on or before August 4th. If it's postmarked, you can accept it. So let's say August 6th rolls around and you get some stuff through the mail, you can accept it. But anything that comes through online is going to be timestamped. So anything through the DMV, your online voter registration, is all going to be timestamped. So you can process anything that is up to 11:59 p.m. August 4th. Midnight is August 5th. We're not processing that stuff. That stuff's going to sit in your queue until the 10th, and you can process it on August 10th. The Secretary of State's office should be shutting down the online voter registration. And I say should be. If they do not shut it down, which sometimes, mistakes happen and people are able to still register and they're coming in on the 5th and the 6th, you cannot process those. If they're, they need to sit. And same thing with DMV. If DMV also should be shut down, if DMV is still processing and you're getting things, then you're gonna let that sit until the 10th. Do we have a question?
Yes, when opening the office for registrations, do we need to have both parties represented or only one person? And when we're having these registration sessions, the office has to be open. It doesn't have to be a registrar or the deputy. It has to be somebody that you guys designate to be there if you guys can't be there yourselves. So yeah, it should be the registrars or the deputies. But in a lot of cases, again, there's small towns where you're only in the office an hour or two a week and you guys have full-time jobs. So
a lot of things are also perception. So you're going to have, regardless, we both have Republican and Democratic primaries on August 9th. They're statewide. So what you're going to want to do is, you may have a local one. You really should, both parties really should be there. It depends on, honestly, and really it depends on how political your town is. I don't think anyone in the city of Waterbury would get upset if there weren't Republicans in the office during the session, but you need to make sure that you have, your office needs to be covered. The main thing is the office has to be open. But you really, I would, if it was me, I would make sure that, both parties were represented. I don't think that anyone's going to go crazy that maybe the Democratic registrar isn't there, or that the Republican registrar isn't there. But I would want to make sure that you're, the most important thing is the office is open. Especially that goes back to the 7th when primary petition pages were due in. It's more important than anything that the office be open, because that's when we have big time issues if someone goes to do a transaction and they can't. So that's why we sent out that email telling them that. So, okay, so all right, so we're all over the place. So let's go to August 8th. August 8th is going to be the deadline for supervised balloting. Supervised balloting of nursing homes and, if necessary, apartment buildings. That's only usually done in larger cities like Bridgeport and Waterbury. But the deadline, everything has to be completed by on or before August 8th. August 8th, there is going to be your final voter registration session. These are going to be, this is the cutoff for anyone that wishes to register and affiliate themselves. So this is going to be the same thing. They're new to the town. They're a United States citizen. They are sorry. They're 17 and going to be 18 on or before November 8th. And again, they're an unaffiliated voter. I don't know if I've said that twice now, but that's the big thing. You can't take anybody else that, you can't take a Democrat or a Republican and switch them in. They can, an unaffiliated voter can go Democrat or Republican. You're going to have a lot of voters that are that are considered independent in the independent party. That is a party in Connecticut. They are affiliated with that party. They're not going to be able to just jump over, and you're going to have to explain that to them.
we have a question. Have we gotten confirmation that supervised voting is happening this year?
As far as I know, it is. It is in the calendar. This is directly from the calendar. We have not heard from the Secretary of State's office in any other way. So at this point, I would say that it is happening, unless we hear otherwise from the Secretary of State's office, and we can, we can task Chris with that responsibility and have him reach out to Ted Bromley and find out. I mean, if the nursing homes are refusing to allow you in, there is nothing you can do in that regard. They fall under the Department of Public Health. We fall under the Secretary of State. So we follow Title IX. I don't know what title Public Health is under, but so you have conflicting state laws. It really is going to come down to whether or not the nursing home is going to allow you in. So,
What is supervised voting?
okay. So supervised balloting of absentees in when you have a nursing home of 20 or more, you are required to go in. So what happens is the absentee applications go to the residents, they fill them out, send them back to the clerk. Instead of the clerk mailing out the ballot, the clerk holds the ballot. They give them to you, and so a Republican and a Democrat have to go out and administer the absentee ballots. In a primary, it's a little different. It's usually especially if it's a local primary, like a state rep, state senate. Excuse me. You're going to have members usually from that political part of the campaign. So usually it's people of conflicting sides in the same party. So a challenging Democrat and an endorsed Democrat, you can take lists from them, just like I said before. You can use those folks. You don't have to use those folks. And then you send them into the nursing home to administer the ballot. They have to be given instructions. Your clerk can help you with that, going over what the instructions are. They usually give them a letter of introduction to give the nursing home to let them know, hey, these really are our people. And they then give them the ballot, and they're going to fill that ballot out. It's the resident does not have to do it in front of you. They can take it back to their room if they want. They can have anyone help them, just like a polling place. Anyone can help in that regard. And you're going to once it's completed, they're going to give it back to you, and you're going to bring it back to your office. There are going to be times, especially with a lot of nursing homes, that folks may be out due to a hospitalization, or they're not there in a doctor's office. They may not be lucid, and if both you and the person you're working with, now see, you can have other folks do this. Some towns use the deputies, some towns the registrars, some towns like I do, we hire about maybe 14 people to do the 28 nursing homes. And so we're pushing that on, off to poll workers to do that. If someone is, if both individuals feel that the person's not up to the task, you can hold the ballot back, but you do have to go back several times until either the individual is lucid or not. And at that point, then a determination needs to be made. But generally, the majority of people that are in nursing homes that are requesting these are doing so on their own. So it's one of those things where if it's a large nursing home, it can be a giant undertaking, and you may need several people. You also one thing to keep in mind, if I was say I'm a Waterbury resident and I end up in a nursing home in Stonington, and I decide I'm staying as a Waterbury resident, I want to vote in Waterbury elections, I can do that. But I also want an absentee ballot because I'm all the way out in Stonington. So what will happen is my town clerk in Waterbury will send the ballot to the town clerk in Stonington. The Stonington town clerk will then give it to your office to administer. And you need to send people to me so I can fill it out, and then it's going to go the same track back. Do we have another question?
Yes, I read that supervised balloting at a nursing home is required if they fill out an application to request that it happens. We have a small nursing home in Reading that sends their own buses to vote.
So the facility has to be, it's 20 beds or more, and is considered supervised absentee. Just because you're in a supervised facility does not mean that you have to vote only by supervised absentee. So I have the Village at East Farms in Waterbury, which is a 3-stage living facility from independent living to convalescent. but it is considered a rest home and it does fall under that issue. So anyone at that address that wants to go to the polls can go to the polls, but with supervised balloting, they do, when they request it, they do receive it that way. And there are some that are cranky about that. Why are you bringing my ballot? Why do I have to give it back to you? But it follows under state law. And so supervising absentee ballots of a nursing home has its own statute in that covers that. If you go back to the Secretary of State's website and pull up the election calendar, under the under all of the stuff that I'm giving you, the actual state statute will be there. So you can take a look at it, confer for yourself, talk to your counterpart, and if need be, any nursing home, rest home, or anything else for that matter that you need to discuss while we're going through this. The state statutes are right there to reference.
Yes, so the question is, do they need to request it, otherwise we're okay, or do we simply inform them that this is an option? And as long as the facility has the 20 beds or more, you're required to do so. It's not 20 beds of people that are voting by supervised absentee, it's 20 beds, and then you may get 19 of those that take that bus to the polls, and that one person that you need to do supervised voting with. Yep. So hopefully that answers that question for you.
And the same thing goes for apartment buildings. So if once 20 registrations from the same address come to the town clerk by law is required to inform the registrars. At that point, the registrars can make a determination as to whether or not they want to do supervised balloting of that apartment building or of that address. So it wouldn't be condominiums, it would be one full building, and you're getting 20 or more. 20 is when you have to be notified. I've only done it once because we had a whole issue and election enforcement had to get involved. I know Bridgeport does it pretty regularly. It's not, of the 169 towns, maybe 4 or 5 do it. So I'm just letting you know that that's what the law is. It's up to the registrars should they want to go forward, if they feel that that's necessary, if they're concerned that they're getting 20 in from one address. I mean, let's, you know, if it was a single house and you're getting, you know, 22 in, at that point, you can do supervised balloting. You can tell the clerk, no, don't mail those ballots out. We're gonna go and personally hand these to them and have them administer them. It's in the books. It's a law. I'm just going over it with you. So then August 9th is the primary. So you're going to get there in your office, you're going to open up and you're going to administer your primaries. You're going to do your end of night reporting that you're going to send to the Secretary of State's office. Right now, again, the election management system is not working. So you may need to, you know, handwrite everything out or type everything up into Excel and then scan it and email it to the Secretary's office that night. But as we get closer to August, they will be, they'll tell us exactly how we're going to do that. August 12th is the last day for the head moderator to declare a discrepancy recount. A discrepancy recount is, the head moderator can call at any time. And we had in the 2020 election, we started processing absentees early because we were informed by the Secretary of State's office to do so because we had 10,000 that needed to be processed. We had an issue in which the machine kept jamming and the person putting the absentee ballots through was making a mistake and it was counting it when it was jamming and putting it through again. And so our count was off at the end of the day. So what we did was our head moderator called for a discrepancy recount just of the absentees for that day. So the next day, we went and took them back out and went through them all and put them through the tabulator. And we were correct in what had happened. The person had put them through was making a mistake. And so we were able to rectify that. So the head moderator can declare a discrepancy recount. And that last day that is August 12th. And at that point between August, I guess it would be August 11th to the 16th is the last day for the recount to take place. And we'll get into recanvas. I have that, I have a whole slide on that fun thing that you'll end up having to do at some point in your life. All right, so that was the primary. Now let's go back into responsibilities. So what are the methods of registering voters and the types of letters that you're going to be sending in your office? So you have your online voter registration, your DMV tumbleweed, in-person and mail registrations, your high school sessions that you have to do. You have to send out a permanent absentee letter in January to everyone who is on permanent absentee status in CVRS. There are your acceptance and change letters, the disenfranchisement letter, DMV letters, your canvas letters, which is your ED 683 and your CVR. And there is a rejection letter you can send if you receive a voter registration card that is not filled out properly. So what does CVRS do besides give you a headache? CVRS is going to create all the reports, and it is a centralized voting registration system. And that's where you're going to find your DMV and your tumbleweed systems, and you're going to do all of your processing. When people request reports from you, that's where you're going to get them. So if you get an FOI for a voter list or anything like that, two things to keep in mind: you have to give them the day, the month of birth and the year of birth, but not the day of birth. That's a new law. If you're doing a disk file through the system, which is just a text file, the system still is not up to date with the law. So you'll have to leave the date of birth off when you're processing that. Same goes in for anybody that comes in and wants to see a voter registration card. Anything that you have is a public document. So if somebody wants to come in and see my voter registration card in the office, I have to produce it and show it to them. But because of the fact it has personal information on it, some things have to be redacted. My driver's license number needs to be redacted. The day I was born on August 30th. So the August and the year that I was born is public information, but the 30th is not public information. That's private information. If the last four of the social security number or the full social security number is on there, you're going to be redacting that as well. So just take it, throw it on your copy machine, take it off, take a Sharpie and just redact away. And then you'll give that information over. Unless they are, they've gone through Secretary of State's office and they have a suppressed address. If they have a suppressed address, you're not going to be giving that information. And that you'll know that they have a suppressed address when you look them up in CVRS. There's no address given there. One thing to keep in mind is any of the suppressed addresses I have in the office, we have a note right on it. So if for some instance I've had quite a few clerks that have come in and gone in the office. When they come to get the card, if somebody was to ask for it, they look at it and say, "Oh, I can't give this out." So that's like a best practice to do. The other best practice to do in registering is to on the bottom of the card where there's the office information that where you're writing down. I highly recommend you write the full voter registration number on that voter reg card. And the reason I say that is if the voter is taken in error, you'll be able to find them. The voter registration number is the same as almost like a social security number. It stays with the voter the entire time. So I'll give you a perfect example. I had a voter who came in irate during the 2020 election because he voted in the primary and now he was no longer on the books. I could not find him. I didn't have him. I pulled up his voter registration card, put his number in the system, and he showed up as a female living in Stafford Springs. So I was able to rectify the situation and go from there. But it is important. And if you don't have that number, if somebody takes your voter in error, it's going to be much harder to find them. And then the rest of the reports that the system's going to do is you're going to have, as I said, there's the change in detail report, which is going to give you, it's a good way to check your work. You can put in a period of account. So from June 1st to June 11th and look to see all the changes that have happened, what has happened in your office. See if you can check to see if you've made a mistake. The disk file, which is just a text format. Alpha list is exactly what it sounds like. It's a list in alphabetical order. You can do it through by name. You can do it by street, and then the street guide. And the street guide is really good if you have multiple districts. I have in the city, I have 7 state rep districts, 2 state senate, 2 congressional. So, and I have 23 ballot styles. So from, excuse me, 23 polling places, I have 12 ballot styles. So for me, this helps, especially breaking down what street. A lot of my streets, one side is one district, one side is this district. So it's a good report to have. Anything that the CVRS system can create is FOIable, it's a public document. But anything with FOI, you do not have to go above and beyond. So if somebody requests a disk file, you can go ahead and submit that disk file to them. You're not required to import it into Excel. I do just because I'm nice, but you don't have to. The way when an FOI request comes in, if you have the report, if the information exists, you're going to give it and you're going to hand it over. And so any of these reports that can be created can also be FOIable, just so you know. You also have in your, so you may not know this, but you have a master account for CVRS, and you may, if you don't have the password, you may have to have it reset through Steve Mason. But this is how you can go in, and this is what it looks like. This is how you add users, modify users. You can reset passwords. You can unlock and lock users. Or if you end up having somebody leave the office, you can delete the that user altogether, which I generally do. So everybody has the same start off. So it's SSVR, and then the last 4 numbers are your the tax ID for your account.
SSVR 2. And then
it's
the
2?
3, yeah.
Okay.
SSVR 2, and then the last 3 numbers are your town's
Tax
code.
IDs,
Yeah, so like Vernon, SSVR 2 146.
I thought I
And
was
yours
special.
is SSVR 2 151.
So, so that's where you're going to find it. If you don't have the password, you can ask Steve Mason for it.
And and your town clerks also have an account just like this for their users. And that is just like ours, SSTC2, and then your tax code. So they are able to see that as well. They do show up on your list. So in my town, I'm nice and I help my clerks reset their passwords and unlock their accounts. But so that is there. We have a question. Is there any special process or wording people need to use for an FOI request? And the answer to that is no. Any request that you receive in your office, it doesn't have to be on a special form or a special format. Any request that you have is basically an FOI request.
Yeah. There's 2 ways of treating FOI. The way I look at it, my city has a protocol for that. There's a website that I have to use that generates letters, and sometimes I have to get the lawyers involved. When we were dealing with the Fight Voter Fraud folks, I was going through the proper creating all of the documentation, but that's because they were requesting huge amounts of information. If you have somebody, that stops in, especially somebody from one of your parties, and like, hey, I need a voter list, that technically is an FOI request. They're asking for information. That doesn't necessarily, you may not necessarily need it in writing. So there really are 2 ways of handling things. Some things are going to have really fast turnaround, and when people are asking for large amounts of records, you may need to follow whatever protocol that you have in your town. Like I said, my town has a whole electronic website that I have access to, that I take their letter that they've sent to me, I upload it, scan it in. It sends off an email request or an email stating that we've received their request and letting them know the time frame. And then if I need assistance through my corporation counsel to go over it with me, I will do that and have them assist with that to make sure I'm following every aspect properly. But yeah, almost any request you get is technically going to be an FOI request. It may not say, you may get the official one that says, under the, they put the public act and I request blah, 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 blah. Fine. Obviously you're going to hold on to that letter for your own record. And then you're gonna go ahead and just give them, you know, if the record exists, you're gonna give it to them. If not, you're gonna put in writing, no record exists. But if I come in and I want to see somebody's voter card, you know, you can do that. If you want to, you know, have them put it in writing, they can do that. But it is an FOI request and you do have to go in that route. So back to CVRS. So that's this page here. That's where you're gonna do that stuff. When you're setting it up for yourself, for a new deputy, for anything of that nature, you're gonna get your access code and your username. You're gonna put it in, and it's gonna bring you right here. The first thing it's gonna ask what the new username is gonna be. You're gonna put that in, so you're gonna know what that is because you're making it up. What is their role and responsibility? Are they a clerk or are they a registrar? Then their information is gonna go in, and you're gonna hit add user. And that's how you add a user into CVRS. Moving over to, if you want to help me with this one,
Absolutely, no problem.
I don't do everything.
There we go. So on this screen, DMV and tumbleweed. So in the system, there are multiple ways to receive voter registrations. One of those is through the DMV and tumbleweed. So you'll see it's broken down on your screen into multiple parts. When you first log in, it's called the reminders screen. When you first open up CVRS, it automatically brings you to the reminder screen. And then throughout the process on the left-hand side, you can just click reminders and it brings you right back. So in order to process your tumbleweeds, it's simple, and you can see the directions on your screen, but you'll go to DMV registrations and it'll say new DMV registrations, or it'll say DMV change of addresses, which are the tumbleweed. If anybody remembers the tumbleweed system, you used to have to log into DMV and into tumbleweed, and that's an old system. Now everything comes right through CVRS. So you'll select review, and it'll say on the right hand side, it'll say review, and it'll bring you to that page. You can print that list if you want to. I don't bother printing the list. I just process them one at a time. And on the right hand side, you'll see after each person's name, it'll say go to VR. You click that and it'll tell you either if there is a voter that is a match in the system already, or if there is no voter that's a match to that particular one that you're processing at that time. If it's not a match, if you're doing change of addresses, if it's not a match to anybody that's in your town, then you just click no action required, because that voter isn't one of yours. You don't have to do anything because they may have lived in your town, but they never registered to vote in your town, or they're already gone from your town for whatever reason. There's also ones that are they're active in your town that are now moving to another town. And for those, you'll see that it lists the new town, and you'll go down and select update voter to off status. And as soon as you select that, it'll open up the voter's screen. There will be a pop-up at the top that says voter has off status. And all you have to do is click accept. Okay. And then it'll give you the letter that says that, hey, you can register in your new town. And then you can send that letter out. And then for the last one, if there is a person that is a match, you select the person below. It's going to give you a list of people, possibly multiple, because it only looks at last name and date of birth. It doesn't look at every bit. And so if you look across the bottom of the screen where the voters are, on the right hand side, you should see, if they put it in there, the DMV ID number, and you can match that driver's license number for the person that you're pulling over and the person that is on the screen that you're currently processing. So you want to make sure that all of that information matches. You'll click select, and then it's going to pop up and it'll say signature will be considered as other change and whatever. That's fine. Just click OK. And then you go in there and you have to type in the address of the voter. and change their party if they change their party, make any other changes that are needed, and then you'll finally be able to hit accept. And then from that screen, once you hit accept, it's going to tell you you have two options. First is to print the voter registration card. I suggest doing that first, because once you click print letter, then you can't get the voter registration card without going and searching for that voter. So hit the button on the right, print that card, and then you can close that screen. And then on the left, well, depending on which browser you're using, if you use Chrome, you close the screen. And then on the left-hand side is a button to click to print the voter acceptance letter. And then you'll print that, and then you'll click the button at the bottom. It'll bring you back to activities again, and you start all over again. Question here is, in Bowser, I was taught for Tumbleweed to go to activities and update to off status there. Then a pop-up screen comes up and we enter their new address and then hit accept. Is that the correct way? You don't need to do that. You're going to do it right through this system, because if you're doing it this way, it will automatically fill in the person's new address for you, and you don't have to type it in. It actually shows up at the bottom of the screen when you're changing your voter. So that is everything about the DMV Tumbleweed, the change of addresses and things of that nature. Now we can move in. Here's my screen. It says, somebody says, do you have to send a letter if there's only a change in a person's name? And you are supposed to send a letter for any change. Even if it's the middle name, even if it was a middle initial and it's going to a full middle name, you're supposed to send the letter regardless. Now we're on to online voter registrations. You want to do this one, or you want me? I can continue. I don't care. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So I'll just continue here for a moment. So the online voter registrations, which, by the way, a year ago I would not have been able to do this when I was working with my former registrar before he passed. But fortunately, I've been doing a lot more of these. So the online voter registrations, it's very much like the DMV ones. So it's on your reminders page in CVRS, and at the top it'll say DMV registration, just like the others. There's two lines there. You'll select review, and then under the name, DMV voter registration applications to be processed. Now there's also going to be one there that says online voter registrations to be processed by mail. And those are separate. That's not the same. We're not talking about those. In that particular instance, the people who have to process them by mail just didn't put in their driver's license number. And so they actually have to print off the card and sign it, because we can't pull the signature in from DMV. But for this, the online voter registration DMVs, select review, and then under the new, you can print the list again if you want to. I never do. But you can, and then just click go to VR next to each person's name as you're going through. And very much like the other section, there's three different choices. One of them is if there's no voter there, if it doesn't find a match, you're going to select new voter. And it's just like processing a brand new voter in your town. You're not pulling them from anywhere. You have to make sure you input all of their data, their party information, phone number, and they may have a separate mailing address. You should not be putting in a mailing address if it's the same as the address where the voter lives, because I know for a fact that if we put in and duplicate that address, when the town clerk goes to do their absentee ballot, it messes with their system, because it's looking for a separate address. So don't duplicate that. The system automatically knows if there's nothing there, they get their mail at their residence address. Another one is match found, but there's no changes. So what I do is I go in and I select go to VR, it pulls up, and I look and see if the voter is changing anything. Sometimes you actually have to go all the way in you select the voter, go all the way in. You verify that absolutely nothing has changed. They've not changed their party, their name, their address, their phone number, anything. Nothing has changed. Then you can go and click back and do no action required. And that just clears that person away without having to print any cards or letters or anything if they've made absolutely no change. And sometimes they do that because they will do online registration and then go to DMV. So you may already have all of that updated information. And lastly, if there is a match found, you're going to do select. Again, make sure you're comparing the screens, the voter information from DMV and what's in CVRS already. Be sure that the information matches before you select that voter. It's important because CVRS does not verify and match all the data for the voter. It only looks at last name and date of birth. So you need to make sure that you're not pulling, like Tim had said earlier, a Chris Prue from Vernon with a February 86 birthday, and going and doing making them I don't know, Danielle, who has the same last name in another town and the same date of birth, because that does happen and actually could happen with me because for some reason I have a cousin with the same name and date of birth. Yeah, good times. It happens. We're seeing it, and Tim explained those before, but just know that again, a pop-up message will come up and it says signature will be considered an other change. And that's really just telling you that the signature is being added to that voter record. And that's a good thing. We want to get the signatures in the system because going forward, the system will have more capabilities, or at least that's what we've been told. One question, Chris, can we use Chrome rather than Explorer Edge with CVRS? And yes, if your computer will allow you to do that, you certainly can. It's odd that I'm not sure why. I have 4 computers here in my office, 2 of which will only use Chrome for CVRS, and the other 2 will only use Edge with CVRS. And they are 4 identical computers, and I don't know why. I don't really care that much to figure out why. So 2 of them just use Edge and 2 use Chrome, and it is what it is. It's fine. But yes, you do not have to use Explorer in your office if and you shouldn't, because we are going to have to update. You should be seeing emails about that.
So I use Chrome, but I cannot run reports with Chrome. I can't run any reports with Chrome for whatever reason. When I am doing anything that I need, like a disk file or anything like that, I have to go into Microsoft Explorer, Internet Explorer, which is no longer supported. I know that they did, there was some things that were done with Edge. I believe I can do it with Edge now. My IT department came through and made those changes. So yeah, it is very wonky. I have a lot of folks that come through that want printouts of their voter profiles so that they can get a copy of their birth certificate or open up a PO box, and the margins are off massively on that through Chrome. When I print it, it's just at this point with Internet Explorer no longer being supported, there really isn't anything I can do. It's just the margins are way off. I have a seal that I stamp on there and I give it to them. Another thing though that Chris had said, I just kind of want to harp on for a second, is and with CVRS, sometimes it literally can be 2 common denominators. My voter's name was Lydell A. Brown, date of birth 1/1/1960, and he became Pamela A. Stevens 1/1/1960. So it took the middle initial and the date of birth and said, do you mean this? What the problem was, and this is an issue we've asked to be looked at, and hopefully with the new system will be looked at. When you're processing that voter registration, the wording on the radio buttons are kind of off. So you see new voter registration or new voter, and then you see the word select next to it. If you accidentally hit select, so when those registrars were processing that voter registration, they needed to hit new voter, but they hit select. When it went to the next screen, all of Lydell's information was removed and Pamela's information was put in its place. So they didn't know at that point they had made a mistake, and they continued on. CVRS kept all of Lydell's information in the background. That's how, when I pulled the voter number up and I saw that he was now Pamela over in Stafford Springs, I was able to see his old Waterbury address, see his old name and things of that nature.
I did see your comment here about using Internet Explorer, and we have it from the Secretary of State's office, from the director of IT there, that you can use Chrome and Edge, and the town clerks are the ones that need to follow that back door into Internet Explorer, because they can't print their labels without using Internet Explorer at this time. So I think the wires are a little crossed with your message from Doug, and I think he means well, but it's, yeah, for us, we can do whatever we need to. It's the town clerks that have that issue.
Let's move on. All right, so the way in which to remove a voter from the rolls, this is something that's important to really know how to do. There are only two ways that they can be removed without incident. They can be removed with a CVR notice, and we usually do that through our canvas, the NCOA canvas. A voter can also cancel, there's a cancellation form. I have one in my office. It was from 1986. It still works. But if the voter just flat out writes on a piece of paper with their name, their date of birth, and they sign it, that can be used to remove them. And you're going to put it as a voter cancel in CVRS. I get a lot of folks that move out of state that'll call and say, I haven't lived in Waterbury forever, and I got a jury duty notice. And we'll say, okay, well, we need this. And they'll get upset. Why can't you just take us off? How do I know you're who you say you are? I need something in writing that states that. And per the Secretary of State's office, it has to be original wet signature. It cannot be emailed. Same thing, and that's really only the voter that can do that. You do not want it, just a perfect example, there was a town a long time ago that had a referenda, and a woman came in and she said, why is my husband on the rolls? He's dead. And they're like, oh, they were so embarrassed. The registrars were, oh my God, I can't believe we missed that. We're so sorry. And per her, they took that voter off. Well, he went to go vote in the next election. There wasn't a referenda, and was furious to find out they had taken him off due to death. It turns out they had a very nasty divorce. So
Yeah, he was just dead to her.
right. So he ended up filing an SEC complaint against the registrars because they basically disenfranchised him. And they were, and they were found to be in violation of state law. So you really do need something in writing. You can't just go and take somebody off. Same thing with, I can go to the next slide. I think.
No, it's yearly canvas.
Okay, never mind, then hold on. The other way, you will get this all the time. Someone will say, I'm power of attorney. And I want my aunt, who I'm power of attorney of, is incapacitated or is unable to vote. You cannot take anything with a power of attorney signature on it. The only person who can, the voter or a judge of probate, are the only two individuals that can cancel a voter registration. You cannot take a signature from a power of attorney. You'll get those, especially in the next slide when we go into Canvas. You're going to get a lot of those that come in with a signature on it. You cannot take that voter off. You can start to move them to the inactive status, but you cannot move them off because you need the signature of the voter.
Yep. Before we move on, one question: what is the yeah, we have another question. Hold on, I can't read them when they're coming in so fast. What is the best way to fix somebody who has been transferred to another town in error? A male twin from our town was taken by another town when his twin moved. How do we fix that?
I had the exact same problem. My good friends over in Watertown actually took my good friend, who is a twin, and made him his brother. And so The best thing to do is first off, contact that town and say, hey, you guys took our voter in error. We're going to pull them back. But you need to re-register that individual because you have there are two people that exist. So the two brothers. My brother was in Waterbury, his brother was in Watertown. When the one in Watertown registered, they pulled the Waterbury registration over to Watertown. Now, if I pull the Waterbury, pull the one from Watertown back to Waterbury, we still have somebody who needs to be registered. So because you're going to want their voter history, you're going to want all of those things on the voter profile. So you're going to call that town, you're going to say, hey, this is the voter, I'm taking them. You need to pull that voter registration card back out, re-register them, and then just for your own due diligence, like a day or so later, check to make sure that they didn't pull the voter back. I've had that where we had like a battle royale between this one voter who got pulled back and forth 4 times. But the original profile really should be with your office, with all of the voter history. If you have to, you can get all of the information off the old profile and recreate it, but really you shouldn't be doing that. You should be getting the original back. The problem is, in this instance now, when they pulled my voter over to Watertown, Patrick was who they pulled. Brendan is the brother. Patrick's profile now has Brendan's signature on it. So it gets a little messy. You may sometimes need to get Steve Mason involved, or sometimes you need to just go ahead and re-register the voter and put the history back in, which is unfortunately going back and forth. That's what I ended up doing with poor Patrick. So,
is it okay to take somebody off based on looking in the obituaries?
yes. So you should be getting a list. If anyone from your town passes away in another town, a death certificate is put on file in your town, a residency death certificate. My grandfather passed away in Waterbury, but he lived in Prospect, and he has 2 death certificates, one in Waterbury, one in Prospect. And your town clerk should be giving you that information. I know that the State Department of Public Health is moving towards an amazing site that's going to give you every single person that passed away in Connecticut. You can use an obituary. You can use information from the town clerk, be it a list. If they show you a death certificate, you can do that as well. Department of Public Health you can use. You just can't take it on somebody's word.
Yep. So if the spouse that Tim was talking about before had come in and shown a death certificate, then they would have been fine because they had proven with the death certificate. But just because they said, oh, my husband's dead and they took him off, that's where the problem was. We weren't able to prove that.
I had actually literally had yesterday when I went to the office, a voter profile in my chair, and it said daughter had called, father's dead, they want him removed off the rolls. So the first thing I did was I put the name into Google with his date of birth, and his obituary popped up. And so I went ahead and moved him off because I could prove that he did pass away.
Yep. And it's important to note that, when we're talking about, removing these people, you're putting them into the off status. You're not deleting them. They have to go to the off status where they sit for a year, and then the system will automatically purge them. Or in the case where we can't prove it, somebody says something, if you strongly think that's what the case is, you can put them inactive. Like if you have, your town clerk says, oh yeah, I saw something, let me go and, I'll get back to you. But not, an actual death certificate. You can't put them off. You can't delete them. Okay.
So when you have no information, we're going to go to the next slide, and it's going to all come together now. So you have to do once we get to the next slide.
That was a question. Sorry.
We'll just come to the next slide. We'll do everything. What do you got for the question?
Does a voter have to fill out the form, or can we accept a letter with a signature?
So no, so I know what you're saying. You're asking if the person's like really elderly or they have multiple sclerosis or there's some disability, as long as the signature from the voter is on there, that's fine. Doesn't matter who types it, who writes it, but it has to give the name, the date of birth, and the signature. Those are the 3 most important things that you need. We're going to carry this conversation into the next slide. So your yearly canvas, your NCOA, canvas, and you're going to get a list of folks that have moved out of town. You're going to get a list of folks who have moved within town, and you're going to canvass these voters every year. Folks that have moved, the larger you are, the more people you're going to have moving within town. Being the 5th largest city, having 125,000 people, I have a lot of people that move within town yearly. So those folks, when it shows up, you're going to send them an ED 683. It's going to say we were given information. The letter is already in the system. It populates all of the wording. You don't have to do that. You're just going to send them the letter. In the letter, it's going to say we have information that you've moved. Please sign and return the letter. You're going to send them. This letter is going to go in an envelope that says do not lose your right to vote. If you're one of the 9 bilingual towns in Connecticut, it needs to be in English and Spanish. It needs to come with prepaid postage to return it back. With the 683, if they do not return it back to your office, you don't have to worry. You just leave them at the new address that you sent them to, because the information was changed to the post office. That is done. You can update their voter card that's on file and update, and their information in CVRS is all set. The CVR is the form that you're going to use. And is there more on another slide of that or not? Okay, so with the CVR, you're going to send that out. That's saying we have information that you from the post office that you moved out of state, out of town. You know, they moved from Waterbury to Bristol or moved from Bristol to Andover. So you're going to send them that information. And then the same thing, same envelope, same prepaid postage, it's just a different form. If they do not respond after 30 days, they're moved inactive.
Automatically.
After 30 days, automatically they're moved inactive. If they send it back and they've signed it, you're going to move them to off status because you have documentation. But we never take a voter off. Just even with post office information, we don't take them off. We start the process. They now have 5 years to show up at any point in time to reactivate their registration. Going back, so in that instance, when the voter came in and said, my husband's dead, why is he on the rolls? What the registrars should have done when they couldn't prove from the town clerk or an obituary or just Googling to see if he's still alive, what they should have done is in their canvas the next year, they should have included him in the canvas and sent the CVR notice to him. He would have gotten it, and he probably would have been angry to get it in the first place, but it would have been the following Title IX and following the law. Anyone who has missed, who has not been active for 4 years or more in town elections can be added to the canvas. The way I do it, because again, I'm a lot larger, I usually do 8 to 10 years, and then we'll send them in anything that we get back undeliverable. So we do a lot of notices that we send out telling people where the polling places are. When those come back undeliverable, we hold on to them and we'll add those into the canvas. You can add in anything. The way it says is any credible knowledge that the registrars have, you can add those folks in. So if somebody hasn't voted in 5 or 6 years, thought process is they're not at that address anymore. You can look at, I have my assessor's information online. So a lot of times I'll look and I'm like, oh, the house was foreclosed. That's why they're not there. So you can go ahead and add them in. That's your credible information is the assessor, and you can add them into the canvas. But it has to be at least 4 years of no voting whatsoever. There is a report in CVRS. I don't cover it in here because when you do inactive voters, what it'll do is it'll give you all people that haven't voted for 4 years. But here's the problem. Say you're brand new to the town and you just registered, you're going to show up in that report. So you don't want to use it in your canvas because you'll be canvassing brand new voters as well as those who have been who have been inactive for 4 years or more. Are you required to take people 4 years and more and put them in the canvas? No, you're not required, but it is for many standpoints. You want an active and updated voter roll. You're going to have people that are going to move out and not tell you, not do NCOA. You're going to have, and a lot of that is usually in-laws that move in and students that move out. They will not do the NCOA, and they'll stay attached to that address. It kind of, at some point, you do want to make sure that you're updating your roles, and that is one easy way to do that is just say, okay, we're going to add these folks in. There are several different companies that deal with NCOA data. They'll all be reaching out to you to purchase that data. Obviously, I would talk to your counterpart. If you're both brand new, talk to your finance department, somebody, and say, who did we used to purchase it from? And you're going to purchase that data. It's usually about $60 for your town, and you're going to add all that in. But like I said, you can add in information that's credible. So people that haven't voted 4 years or more can be added. So we hadn't done a citywide in 10 years in Waterbury. And so we did a full canvas in 2016, I want to say, and we had about 10,000 voters that were moved to inactive. And of those 10,000, probably about 2,000 in the next 2 to 3 years were rediscovered. So they went to the DMV, they did something and they reactivated. They still hadn't voted, but their information was updated and proper in the system. So we have another question, it looks like.
Multiple
Questions, oh my.
All right. If we do a mailing about polling places and the mail's returned, can we move them to the inactive status now, or do we have to wait until next year's canvas?
No, you can't. So if you do a mailing about polling places, that is not a CVR notice. CVR notices and acceptance letters are the only things that when those come back undeliverable, you can start the process. So if I registered to vote and my acceptance letter comes back undeliverable, you can then follow it up with a CVR notice and then start the inactive process. But you cannot just take general mail. So yeah, you would have to hold those to the side and then dump those into your next canvas. A lot of times it could be information missing. Like Waterbury is the kingdom of condos. So a lot of times we just don't have the unit number. And when we were doing the absentees, sending them all out, we did 2020, and then unfortunately we did 2021, all absentees, mailing them out back and forth. And we got a lot returned undeliverable. Post office sent me ones back saying no such street, which was the street I drove to get to work on that day. So I'm not sure what the post office was thinking. A lot of time units are missing. I learned that a bunch of zip codes were in wrong. So it was coming back undeliverable. So yeah, you can't, it has to be the official CVR notice to start the process of removal. It can't just be a letter that you send. That coming back undeliverable is credible information to know that you can dump into the next canvas, but you can't move anybody inactive unless you've done the CVR process, and you can only do the CVR process during the NCOA and when an acceptance letter that you send after you register comes back undeliverable. What's my next question?
We have a voter in our town that we know does not live here, but they are using someone else's address. We've added them to the canvas. Letters get returned. We move them to inactive. They show up and vote and show ID and fill out the registration form and are allowed to vote. Then come the next canvas, the same thing starts again. What can we do?
The only thing that you can do is file a complaint with election enforcement. You can just state that you know that this individual is not a resident. You're going to have to give a lot of backing information. So whatever information you're getting, so you're probably getting information from the DMV through other things you're going to need to include, and you're going to have to send that over to election enforcement. The other thing you could do is maybe alert your assessor and say this person is adamant. You may want to look into this because they may now owe the town taxes. And I'm actually in the process of doing the same thing. I have the exact same issue, and I am going to be sending everything to the assessor, and they're going to go ahead and start. It's a long haul tractor trailer trucking company, and so they're going to start paying personal property tax on their tractor trailers at 60 mills in the great city of Waterbury. So your only repercussion really is to go through election enforcement. They're stating under penalty of law. They're signing all these documents under penalty of law that they live where they say they live. Your hands are pretty much tied at this point. All you can do is go to election enforcement and file a complaint with them.
Moving on.
Primary petitions. So you guys have already been through this now. So you should all be pros on primary petitions. But there are two types of petitions. And so primary petitions are the ones that we give out. Nominating petitions are what the town clerks give out. And primary petitions are to actually force a primary, where nominating petitions are to get directly onto the November ballot. So if you are in a district, there's different ways of giving them out. Like I said, there's always an exception to the rule. So if you have a district, I have the 16th and 15th state senatorial, I have the 68th, the 71st, and the 89th state representative districts. Those are districts because they're in multiple towns. If I wanted to primary, or anyone wanted a primary for that seat, they have to get their petition from the Secretary of State's office. I have the 72nd, 73rd, 74th, and 75th General Assembly districts. Those are municipal districts. Those, so if I want a primary for those, I'm going to give those out myself. The registrar is going to give those to the candidate looking to primary for that. Same thing for if it's citywide. So really, excuse me, the only time you're going to be giving out the only time Secretary of State's office is going to be giving out primary petitions is when it hits more than one town. Anything that encompasses your town wholly and solely, you're going to be giving out. So all the local for all your municipal next year, you're going to be giving those out. If there was a registrar of voters or state rep solely within, you'd be giving those out. Do you have another question?
If an acceptance letter is returned as undeliverable, can we send out a CVR letter immediately, or do we have to wait until the next canvas?
No, you can send the CVR out immediately when it comes back undeliverable, but you have to follow the rules. So you can't take a voter off, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, 60 days before an election.
Yes.
So they cannot be marked inactive 60 days before the election. So right now, if you register to vote and it comes back undeliverable, we have to make sure it's 60 days before the August 9th primary. Same thing for the November 8th election. But yes, you can send it out and then you can mark them inactive if it's 60 days before an election.
Yes, which is why last year, yeah, a couple, when we had the presidential preference primary, we weren't allowed to do the canvas 2 years ago. Yeah, because it was too close to the election. Primary petitions, spot that asks for a notary to sign and stamp. It also says that it can be a lawyer. The
Yes.
question is, can a candidate on that petition certify their own petition page?
That's a really good question. I do not believe so. So the back of the petition page, the top part, the registrar from the town is signing, stating that that person has party privilege. Then the second section is a notary, town clerk, justice of the peace, an officer of the court, so a judge all the way down to an attorney can all sign that. And then the registrar of that town is certifying at the bottom how many signatures are actually good. I would get clarification from the Secretary of State's office. I would say they can't, but I would get that in writing. Usually people don't certify their own. I'm guessing that this is a question that came in because you probably received it in your town. So what I would do is send an email to Ted Bromley and just specify, say, we received this primary petition page. It came in. The candidate themselves certified that they were the circulator, as well as the person that collected all the signatures. How should we process this? And he'll give you a yes or no. Whatever he responds back with, which will be yes or no, will end up being an actual legal opinion that you can go ahead and take to court if need be.
Yeah, so print that, save it,
Right.
keep a Bible of those.
What I tell everybody is, me answering that question, you can't say, if you were ended up in court, you can't say, well, the registrar from Waterbury told me. They're going to say, well, that he's not a lawyer, that doesn't count. But if the director of elections told me, who is a lawyer, who falls under the Secretary of State's office, you can take that to the bank and to the court all day long. You got something else?
A follow-up.
Yeah.
Nothing really says. Seems more like code of ethics. One at a time here, guys. More like a code of ethics issue. Contacted the state. Yes, they had us proceed and send to SOTS. Yep, they're working on it. How do we help get the decision in writing or further potential issues? Yeah, just again, everything in emails to Ted, because anything that that Ted sends you is as good as a legal opinion that the court will uphold.
Anything that comes from the Secretary of State's office is a legal directive. So anything that they send you, anything that they direct you to do is you're going to follow that. So anything that you have that falls under this that you're uncomfortable with or leery of or you question, and it's right to question things, is just to put it all in email form directly to the Secretary's office. Any of the staff attorneys that answer that, including Ted Bromley, you can take that as an actual legal opinion and you can go to process from there.
Whew, so many. Somebody said, yes, it's happened to my counterpart. Her town committee forgot to endorse and she had to petition and said that she could issue and accept her own petition pages.
That's different.
But yeah, that's a bit different.
So if you were being primaried or if there was a failure to endorse, and so I know there was at least 2 registrars that did not receive the nomination for this year. They had to give themselves primary petition pages and go out, circulate, and then submit them back to themselves. That's different than signing the second part, stating that they are the town clerk, attorney, or justice of peace, anything like that. This is just a failure to endorse. So it's 2 different situations around petitions. And so if you were primary, you would be giving them out. What I always tell everybody is with perception is the most important thing. One of the registrars that did not receive the nomination, I told them that it would probably be best if their deputy was the one that issued them to them, because the deputy can do that. And so the deputy was the one that typed them up, wrote them up, signed it saying that they were in good standing as a member of the political party, and then that individual went out and circulated petitions. And when they came back, the deputy took them in, went through, checked them, signed them. It's just a perception thing. Would it be wrong if that registrar did it all? So they're being primaried, they sign the first section on the back, they sign the third section on the back, they check them and they submit them, that they're following the law, they can do that. It's just a perception thing, is what I always tell everybody. All right, so those are petitions. Ballot access. Ballot access. So candidate has several ways they can gain access to the ballot. Nomination from a major or minor party will give them ballot access, generally. Successful petition onto the ballot via a nominating petition. And then when they do that, they need to obtain at least 1% of the total vote for an office in the general election. So if I was going to do a nominating petition for, say I wanted to run for registrar of voters, I didn't get the nomination and I'm upset, and I think I have enough clout in the town to win this election, to come in first or second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get nominating petitions from the town clerk. I need to collect 1% of the total vote from the last election for registrar of voters. And then my name will be placed in on the ballot for November. There are other ways to get towns on. If your town has never had a certain party, they're going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to take out nominating petitions, and they're going to have to circulate those and submit them to the town clerk in order to get access. So that's how parties are placed on if they don't have access already. Yeah. Okay. We'll go to the next one.
Emergency plans.
Emergency plan. This is really important. So you should have, and you do have, an emergency plan for your town on how to go ahead and deal with emergencies that are going to come up for election day. If you have not seen it, you need to find it. It should be on file not only with Secretary of State's office, it should be on file in your town clerk's office. And this has been the law since 2011. You may need to review it. You may need to update it. When you make any changes to it, it has to go to your local governing board. So I have a board of aldermen. Some of you have you have town council. Some of you have selectmen. Whatever you have, it has to go to. They vote on it, and then you update it. You put it on file at Secretary of State's office and the town clerk. It's such things as what happens if you run out of ballots. What happens if you lose power on election day? What if there's a massive snowstorm? How are you going to get your moderators in to open up the polling place? all of these things that you need to keep in the back of your mind. What if a disaster happens? How are you going to go forward with it?
Yep, and the state actually sent out a generic emergency plan when this first started. And many towns use that
Right.
as, I mean, I do. I highly doubt, although this is 2022, but I highly doubt that the last page of the state's emergency plan is ever going to happen, where I don't know that we're going to have to worry about a nuclear disaster, but you never really know. I mean, again, everything that you need to know is in there, and just keep it up to date.
But you do need to know what your emergency plan states. I mean, if there's an issue, everything follows to the registrar. So if there's an emergency on the day of the election, it's your responsibility to address it. And you should see what's in your plan, and you should know what's in your plan. If you read the plan and you go, well, this is ridiculous, or this is so outdated, then you need to go and rewrite it. It's not, and then put it on file. It's, as Chris said, the original one from 2011, so from a little over 10 years ago, did address things such as nuclear disasters. I don't know what you do in that state. If a nuclear bomb goes off, I'm not sure you have to worry about anything.
Yeah, I actually talk about that during moderator training, and I tell them usually there's not enough time to do much, just hug your friends.
But there are things. What if you're in a lockdown in a school? What if the fire alarm goes off? What if there's a real fire? How are you going to secure the ballots? How are you going to secure the tabulator? These are things, and your moderators need to be aware of what is in the plan. When you're doing moderator training in your town, you need to explain to them what happens. And I'll tell my moderators, if the alarm goes off and the fire department shows up and tells you you've got to leave, then obviously you're going to, if you can unplug the tabulator and wheel it out and lock the ballots up, great. If you don't have time to do that, take a screenshot, but at the same time use common sense. If you see smoke, smell smoke, see flames, get the hell out of there. But do your best to secure what you can. We have yet, and I think this is real wood, we have yet to have a school lockdown during an election. So that would be, I don't know what we would do in that situation. I was in a voter registration drive in a high school, and they had an active shooter drill. And we were forced, my counterpart and I, to go into this science class and shelter in place during the drill. It's a different reality that we live in now, but it is something that you need to keep in mind. How is that going to impact elections? Should even something like that happen, where they lock down a lot of schools near banks? The minute a bank is robbed, that school is on lockdown. Nobody's coming in, nobody's going out. So how would you address that? And these are questions that you may need to go directly to your Board of Ed with, or your superintendent, and say, we never thought of this. How would we go about this? Because there is no state law on election end. So you would need to address that. So this just gives you information on what they are, all the emergency plans. It was the state laws 9-17 or 174A. It goes in and explains everything. So solutions for ballot shortages, strategies to implement in the event of a shortage of absentee or absent poll workers, a loss of power, a fire, voting machine malfunctions, weather, natural disasters, the poll worker needs to be removed, and disorder in and around the polling place. So, for instance, we have a directive in Waterbury that if I have a polling place that loses electricity, we're bringing the fire department up with generators to get it back up and running. And basically just run some lights inside and enough energy to keep that tabulator up and running, because the election's not going to stop. One thing to point out, especially those of you that may be brand new to all of this, is September 11th, 2001 was a municipal primary in the state of Connecticut. And Secretary Bysowitz was being questioned whether or not we were going to stop the election and do it again. And we did not. So on September 11th, the state of Connecticut was going forward with a primary, municipal primary. And so it's something to keep in the back of your mind that if an actual disaster does take place, more than likely, we're going to continue on with that election. So how are you going to go about that? It is your responsibility to train all of your poll workers before every single election. And your moderators need to be certified and up to date. And you can get that list from the Secretary of State's office, and you can get that list on our website as well. And it'll tell you what the certification deadline is, when they need to retrain. Certification's good for 4 years. And like I said, make sure your poll workers know what to do, especially if you have multiple polling places. You can't be, and your counterpart can't be in 3 places at the same time. So if a tabulator malfunctions, what are they going to do? Do you keep your spare tabulator at the polling place? Do you keep it in your office? I have 23 polling places, and I keep the backup polling tabulators in my office. Should the tabulator go down and can't be repaired, my poll workers and my moderators know that everything goes in the auxiliary bin until we can get everything up and running. And usually it takes me from downtown to get to the polling place anywhere between 4 to 8 minutes, and then everything's up and running again. But your poll workers need to know what they're going to do if something goes wrong. The next one.
Do poll workers need to be trained for a referendum? And since Tim doesn't even know what a
I don't know
referendum
what that
is,
is.
I will take that question. The answer is yes. It's held very similarly to an election. Referendums, you still need to have poll worker training. A lot of times it looks a little different than election training. We, instead of holding our poll worker training a week or 2 in advance of the referendum, like we would an election, we need a much smaller number of people. If you're having a referendum, you probably have a smaller town. And we will do our poll worker training the night before when we do the polling place setup. But yes, they still have to be trained. They have to sign off that they were trained. They still have to take the oath, just like an election.
Election equipment, another one of your big responsibilities. The state of Connecticut owns all of the election equipment, and it is your town's responsibility to maintain and keep up to date all of that information, all of the equipment. So you should have, every polling location should have 2 tabulators. One is the backup. It is to make sure that you have the correct memory cards for each polling location, along with the appropriate ballots. And the IBS ballot marking equipment must be available at all polls and all polling locations for anyone who wishes to use them regardless of disability. And the IBS is in the process of being updated. If you haven't already had your appointment, they are adding new ways in which to use that system for different disabilities. It's your responsibility to maintain them. So, and you're going to get this this question a lot. Why can't we use a different company? Why can't we go out to bid? Why are we paying all this money? And the answer is because the Secretary of State's office signed the contracts. And there are only a handful of companies you can use, and you cannot use other companies. So LHS is contracted to maintain the voting tabulators and the ballot boxes. Those are the only individuals that you can get memory cards from, tabulators, and have them come in and do maintenance. You have a maintenance contract with LHS. It's a 3-tier contract. If you don't know which contract you have, you can contact LHS and they'll tell you what your town purchased and what is going into effect July 1st for your town. I have the top tier because I have more tabulators than I know what to do with. It is your responsibility to make sure that you have that appointment with LHS once a year for servicing. You want to make sure that they're checking the ballot boxes. They're old. There are baffles in there that for write-ins, when you put it through, where that ballot's going to go. And a lot of people don't realize that the black boxes actually fall under the maintenance contract. IBS is contracted to maintain all the AVS equipment, which is the disabled voter system and the accessible voter system. And that they're the only company that you can deal with for AVS equipment. The AVS system will be downloaded. You're going to have a download that comes to your computer. You put it on a jump drive, and that's how you're going to program that information on there. Your town is responsible for the cost of programming the AVS equipment for elections and referenda. So when you have special elections, you have referenda, you're required to have the IVS set up, and your town has to pay for that programming. For general elections and general primaries, the state will pick up the cost of that. But you will get a bill. I had a town committee primary and I had a special election this year. And we had to pay the cost for programming for both of those. So those were added costs that we had to make sure was in our budget.
And you will have to also let IVS know that you are having a
Yes.
referenda. Because unlike during a state election, they have no idea that you're even having something. So just like with an election, you have to send them some of your ballots, you have to, it's the same process. Reach out to them. She's very good at helping you with the process, whatever you need. It's very simple to do and it's not terribly costly. And it's required, so.
All right, so this is really important, especially as we're going into August. We're gonna have our primary on the 9th, is you need to have a polling place pre-election check. Excuse me, you need to, especially if you're using schools, right at that time of the year is when they usually start doing the big maintenance to the schools. And you may find out the gymnasium that you planned on using, the floor has been removed because they're refinishing it and putting in a whole new floor, or you can't use the gym because they've just sealed it and for the next school year. This happens all the time. You need to get out ahead of it. So what I always suggest is you get early permission and you go and do a site check and you just walk through and make sure everything's okay. I had one time we use a Catholic school and another Catholic school, they had merged. They moved the entire 120 years of a Catholic school from one end of Waterbury into the gymnasium of the Catholic school that I was using for a primary. And so I had to cordon off the whole section and move the polling place forward in the gym in order to stay ADA compliant. And we're going to get into ADA compliance in a little bit. But these are things that you need to know because you'll have plenty of time. It may turn out you need to use a different room. It may turn out you need to use a totally different facility. And if that's the case, you need to notify all the voters in writing ahead of time. So you want to make sure that you're not caught off guard. There was a case, and election enforcement, when they come to our conferences, like to tell the case a lot about a town that there was asbestos remediation going on. And anyone 18 and over could come in, but anyone under that age couldn't come into the building, and it caused a big issue because a lot of parents were saying they couldn't vote, and it just got into a big thing. There's been a lot of times roofs start leaking or collapsing, and at that point you have to move a polling place. I had a roof collapse at one of my polling places about 2 months before the election, and that polling place has not reopened, so I had to permanently move it. But these are things that you don't want to be caught 3 days before the primary going, what do we do now? Because when you contact the Secretary of State's office, they're going to say, why didn't you check the facility? So it is your responsibility. I like to do, and I highly recommend everyone do, a pre-election organization meeting. This is run by you. You invite everyone that has a stake in your election that works for the municipality that day. So you're going to want, for me, I have fire department, I have the police department, I have the superintendent's office, I have the head maintainer for all of the schools, I have the parks department because we have parks buildings, I have the mayor's office that has representation there, the town clerk, and the IT department. And we run down every single thing so that everyone knows what their job is, what we need from them, and they understand that if there's an emergency, it's a part of our emergency plan that we're going to fall back on that. So the fire department knows you better have those generators ready, because if we're going to call you, you can't be like, oh, it's across town sitting over here. And they have numbers for our moderators. We have a direct line into the police department should we need it that day. And everybody's going to be different depending on the size of your town. But this way, everyone knows what is needed. Because usually at 5 o'clock in the morning, when you're in your office, usually you're on your own. This way, everyone knows that if there's an issue, you're going to be calling at 5:01 because you can't get into a building, because there's no electricity, because something happened. If we have a massive snowstorm in November, I'm going to have Public Works spending, and I'm not exaggerating, sending plow trucks to my moderators' homes to pick them up and bring them to the polls. The poll workers can trickle in, but the moderator needs to be there to open up. The polling place, the election always happens at 6, and it's gonna happen at 6. So if there's a nor'easter going on, we're gonna make sure that our plow trucks are going directly to the moderators and getting them and bringing them in. And that's something that they did back in the storm of 78 with a lot of these towns that were having referenda. And so that was way before my time, but that's some of the things that were going on. That's how Governor Grasso got around Connecticut, was in the back of, in the passenger seat of a DOT truck. So it's something that we will do. So the polling place has to be accessible. There is an ADA checklist. You can keep putting arrows. There we go.
Oh,
So a lot of this is in your moderator training that you go through, but this is really important. There's they need to check the parking lot, make sure that there's 2 spots. Post the signs for if there is a handicap door that's separate than the normal door. Clear all the pathways. That's why I had to move that polling place forward and just block it off with things. You're going to set up a wheelchair accessible privacy booth. If you don't have one, you just take that privacy booth, take the legs off, put it on a table, no chairs, because the chair would not make it ADA compliant. So you would take the booth with no legs, put it on top of a table with no chairs. Someone in a wheelchair can roll right up to it. You have the option of setting up seating for tired voters if you have long lines. Review the curbside voting process, and confirm the presence of the IVS, and make sure that that's set up. I had poll workers back when we had the old style, which was a fax machine, say, well, we'll set it up if somebody needs it. No, that's not how that works. It needs to be set up, ready to go. There is an ADA checklist from the Department of Justice. You need to have that filled out. This is, and I know this because this was an issue in my city. So every time you have a new polling place, you need to fill this out. If your town has an ADA coordinator, great, have them do it. If they don't, I don't. I work with my Department of Public Works. We go site to site. You only need to do this once, and you keep it on file yourself. This has not been sent out to the registrar since 2004. So it's something that a lot of registrars don't even know is required. It was done prior to 2004, and it's never been sent out again. It is your responsibility to make sure that your polling place is ADA compliant and have that record on file. The way to get it is literally just to Google Department of Justice ADA polling place checklist, and it'll pop up as a PDF. They update it every few years, and you're going to need to fill that out and have it on record. If anyone questions the accessibility of your polling place, you'll be able to pull it out and say, well, we did do this, we did that, we have this. What temporary measures need to be put in place if necessary. A lot of us have much older buildings and we need to do temporary things. Do we have questions, or are you just making faces?
we have somebody who's new
Okay.
and is asking what curbside voting is.
Okay, so curbside voting, I'm gonna go right into what the law says on curbside voting. Curbside voting is for a voter who shows up to the polling place and is temporarily incapacitated while at the polling place. So at that point, what you're gonna do is you're gonna send your assistants out to that voter. It could be for whatever reason. Maybe they got lightheaded and they're sitting in their car. Maybe they fell, whatever purpose. They're gonna go out, you're gonna check their ID like you would any other voter. They're gonna get crossed off in the book. Both assistants are gonna give them the ballot to fill out. They're gonna put the ballot in the privacy shield. And then you're gonna go back to, the assistants are gonna go back to the tabulator and insert that ballot through. Different towns do it different ways. We do curbside voting in Waterbury. We have voters that are incapacitated and you never question anyone's disability. So if somebody says that they need it because they can't get in, so be it. I am not like the town of Vernon where I am standing, where they have the curbside voting ring bell. Some towns have that.
We got rid of that.
Oh, you got rid of it? Okay, because some towns have the ring bell outside where you ring the bell and they'll come out. If I had that in Waterbury, my polling places would look like a Dunkin' Donuts at 7 a.m. So anyone who requests curbside voting receives curbside voting. We don't say, well, why? If somebody fell, you want to make sure your moderator's writing that down in their notes, they're documenting it, and that it's well known because you may have a lawsuit on your hands. I've had that. A woman fell in a puddle in one of my polling places, and we had to do curbside voting because she hadn't made it all the way into the polling place, and she sued the city. So we were well documented on that one. But yeah, so that's what curbside voting is. But like I say, the law says a voter who has become incapacitated when arriving at the polling place. That's what it's for.
Yep. And it's good to note, like Tim said, it has to be the 2 assistant registrars. If you're having a primary, well, I mean, if it's a single party primary, you're probably not going to have 2 assistant registrars. But you know, it can't just be pick 2 poll workers. It has to be the 2 assistant registrars. You know, you should be documenting, you know, I always ask the moderators to document who's doing curbside, just for the purposes of keeping track of that as well. So, and the last thing on this is if you have a separate entrance for your handicap accessibility, Tim had said, make sure that, you know, that you have that 75-foot area, the restricted area there as well. Just know that it's not 75 feet from the door to the room that you're using. It's 75 feet to the door to the building for accessibility. And if you have those extra entrances, that you have that 75 feet from multiple entrances. You got fancy.
Yeah, I did get fancy. This is right from my moderator polling stuff. The other thing I will point out, because this is always for some reason asked, the 2 service animals that are allowed in a polling place are a canine and a miniature horse. I've never seen the miniature horse. I know that one town has a miniature horse that comes in. That is acceptable. You cannot use a seeing giraffe or a seeing cat or anything of that nature. It's a canine or a miniature horse. This is your IVS machine. These should be in those big giant black boxes that weigh about 50 pounds that you have to hurl around your office. And these are the instructions on how to fill it out, how to set it up. It's very simple. Everybody's access code is 9630. So you're going to put it in there and you're going to find it. So for this election, for instance, if somebody comes in to vote on August, you're going to put in 9630. You're going to see your 2 ballot styles. So you're going to see Republican and Democrat. You're going to choose the right ballot. Do they need it? What style? Do they need it in English and Spanish? Do they need it? Are they going to use the keypad, or are they going to use the touch screen? And now there's the new the new
Sip and puff.
The sip and puff aspect. So this slide's going to have to be updated. But yeah, those are things that, you know, how they need the ballot done. Ballot's going to go through that printer, and then you are going to place that ballot, or the voter, depending on if they are unable to do so. You can have an assistant take that ballot and put it directly through the tabulator. You're going to need to have your signs up on election day. If you don't have if you can't find your signs, Secretary of State's office has them and can send them to you. They'll drop ship them. But what do you need for this year, for this election? Federal elections, you're going to have the 3 easy steps to voting. Your ID requirements for voters with asterisks. We'll explain that in a second. You're going to need sample ballots on the wall, the voter bill of rights, and the instruction for provisional ballots. Those are for federal offices only. One thing to point out to everyone: provisional ballots on August 9th, only Republicans will be able to get a provisional ballot, because the statewide ballot for the Republicans has the United States Senate on it. The Democratic ballot has Treasurer and Secretary of State, which are state offices. So you will need to have that provisional ballot sign up, but anyone that comes in and does not show up on the list and is adamant, it really is going to be for Republicans only. If you have somebody that comes in and is adamant that they're a Democrat, they've always voted then you can give them, you know, there's nothing to count, because the only thing you would be counting is federal office. So really, provisional ballots are only going to be available for Republicans on August 9th. Your the asterisk, what is the asterisk? Asterisk is when you go to vote, you still have no form, you've never proven identity when you registered. And you still have not proven identity on that day. So you show up and you need to use some form of identification. And you'll have the identification poster, that's the next slide, that taped to the desk, telling the voter what they can provide to you. If they still have, if they still do not have a identification, they're going to be given a provisional ballot. But that again is going to fall just to the Republican side. On the Democratic side, I'm not sure exactly how that would go forward. It's not a federal election; it's a state election.
Yep.
So at that point, they would be given Form 3.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's unfortunately for this upcoming primary, there's going to be 2 sets of rules for each party. So if you've never shown identification and you're a Republican, and you have an asterisk by your name, you're going to be given a provisional ballot if you still cannot produce the identification. Then you're going to that's going to go back to the registrars, and they're going to see whether or not they're going to count it. The Democrats are not having a federal election; they're having a state election. So those are going to fall under different rules. So if I come in and I still have no form of identification, I'm going to fill out Form 3, which is a self form stating under penalty of law, I am who I say I am, and that's going to be collected, and they're going to be given a ballot and they're going to vote. And it's very important that your poll workers know the difference as to what's going on, and that there will be 2 confusing sets of rules for those that have an asterisk by their name that have not proven identity.
And this primary that we're about to have, they're 2 separate elections. It just happens to be at the same time, in the same place, run by the same moderator,
Right.
you know, but they're technically, they're 2 separate elections. They're 2 separate primaries. If we're having a single primary, would both registrars need to be present, or just the one whose primary it is? And I guess,
I don't want to answer that.
I know. Technically, no, only the
Right.
registrar that's having the primary has to be there, but
Not very
but
nice.
yeah, that wouldn't be very nice. No, I mean, I would never leave my counterpart just to run something by themselves. But yeah, I mean, I guess technically, no, you don't have to.
Right. No, technically they don't have to be there. It does free up 2 people to help you, though, the registrar and the deputy. And I have been putting out fires in Democrat-only primaries in Waterbury. Excuse me. So it's you know, you should have a great working relationship with your counterpart. And if you don't, you need to work on that. But that being said, it should free up 2 people that are going to be able to help you on that day. I especially know in the super small towns like the little town of Bethlehem, the deputies, they trade back and forth our moderators for election day. So in that regard, if there was a one-party only primary, the deputies would still be working. The 2 registrars work as the assistants. So, but when you have a tiny office, 1 polling place, and less than 2,000 voters, you can do things like that, where I can't. Provisional ballots. So I just went through what the provisional ballot, who gets it in this election. It's going to be Republicans only. In November, it's going to be anyone that comes in and and is not on the list and cannot be proven a voter. So if I come in to vote and I'm not on the list, first thing that should be happening is I should be sent to the assistant registrar. And the assistant registrar should first be checking the inactive list to see if I'm on there. If I am, they're going to have me fill out a new voter registration card, write me in the back of the official book, and have me go vote. If I am at the wrong polling place or I need to transfer in, really what needs to happen is a call needs to be made to the registrar's office, and they need to look up the voter. It could be I'm not registered. Could be when you're at a large city like Waterbury and you have 23 polling places, I'm at the wrong polling place and I need to go to the correct polling place. Or it could be I moved and I need to transfer in. If I'm transferring in, I'm filling out a voter registration card, being written in the back of the book. My old polling place is receiving a call to have me marked off because I'm voting in a different polling place that day. If I'm not registered, period, I should be going to same-day voter registration. But if I'm adamant that I'm going to, I'm a voter, then I'm gonna be given a provisional ballot and I'm gonna fill that out. It's for federal offices only. So for this year in November, it's gonna be United States Senate and Congress. Those are the only two that are gonna count. And so next year in the municipal, there are no provisionals. So the provisional ballot poster goes in the corner, doesn't go out, and you're gonna go that way. But these are the way you do it. You need to have your provisional envelope ready. It's 1% of the total number of enrolled electors. So say you have 1,000 people registered in your town, then you're gonna need to have on hand 10 provisional ballots. We had back in 2018, that seems right, that sounds right. 2018, we had Johanna Hayes, who was from Waterbury, running for Congress. And we, for provisional ballots on the Democratic primary, we had gone up to, I want to say 50% per polling place. And it was a good thing we did because there were, I want to say at least 800 provisionals that were executed that day by unaffiliated voters, and they did not count. But we were ready. No one was turned away because we weren't prepared. And I'm not going to get into why that happened. There was a lot of tweets and Twitter things that made a run on the polls, and we had to go through that. So in a primary, you're not going to have election day registration. In a general, you are going to have it, and really that voter should be sent to EDR. But sometimes people are adamant, there's no way, they're refusing, they're going to stay here. And the reality is, all right, well, if it turns out you are registered and there's a mistake, the only two offices that are going to count are United States Senate and Congress. If you go to election day registration, we can guarantee it's going to count, because right now we don't believe you even are a registered voter, and you're going to get the full ballot from United States Senate all the way down to the most important office in the land, which is Registrar of Voters. So you're going to want to make sure, you really want to push people into election day registration, but you will get that one or two voters that are just adamant, and it is their right to request and execute one.
Yep, and they can do a provisional ballot and go to election day registration if they are so adamant to do so. Yep. And I see that you have some question marks there. How many days? They have 7 days. Registrars have 7 days to determine whether or not to count those ballots.
Usually when
that was a test question.
I guess. But my thing is, I almost always get a provisional ballot in federal elections. And if I have citywide, because I have 54,000 voters, if I end up with, in a federal election, let's say I end up with 16 provisional ballots, usually I end up counting 2, because it's usually a mistake made by a poll worker, and they were on the list. And the reality is, that's why we instruct all our poll workers that no one is to be sent away without a phone call to our office to verify that they're in the wrong polling place. We keep the official book, the official checkers book, as a PDF on the desktop. So I have exactly in front of me what they have in front of them. And I'll say to them, the voter is on page 26, sequence number, 126. And then all of a sudden I hear, oh, and it turns out their eyes are just tired. It's been a long day. So otherwise, we wouldn't give that voter a provisional. But once in a while, you can't be everywhere. And unfortunately, sometimes poll workers, especially the checkers, are going to take things on their own. And you got to deal with that. Hand counting is really important. So hand counting, the voter intent determines the result. So you may get a voter that comes in during the day, and they're allowed as many ballots until they get it right. But it keeps the tabulator keeps spitting it out, spitting it out, spitting it out. They get frustrated. They put it through the auxiliary bin. What you're going to do is you're going to take that ballot out at the end of the night. The moderator is going to take it out with the 2 assistants and look at it. And it may be because they did everything but hit the vote, circle the oval. They may have circled the entire, circled the individual, wrote a whole life story as to why they wanted that person. That is the intent. That's voter intent. We're going to count that. But you're going to bring your 2 officials in to do that. Those are your auxiliary bin ones. There's going, I know I have on here, hand counting. Do I have a slide on write-ins or no? Is that next?
EMS.
Okay, so that's here. So you're gonna have, this is really gonna be more for November. But this also this is really important when hand counting for write-ins. So when you take that ballot and you circle in the write-in, and you write in whatever you write in, when you throw it through the tabulator, it's gonna throw it over to the side. You wanna make sure your moderators, when they look at that ballot, what the tabulator did was it said, okay, I tabulated, let's say there's 6 races. I tabulated 5 of the 6. But that one, I know you have to mark down who that person is. So I'll just put it over here for you. That's basically what the tabulator is doing. If your moderator takes that ballot after they do the write-in and record it and put it back through again, it's going to count everything again. And your numbers are going to be off. And you're going to end up having more people voted than being crossed off. And this has happened normally in municipal races where moderators are not paying attention and putting the ones that are in the write-in bin in the back through a second time. Really what they should be doing is putting the ender card through, canceling out the election, looking at those write-ins. Most of the write-ins won't count because, especially in a presidential, you'll be amazed at what people will write in. Unless they're an official certified write-in candidate or a candidate already on the ballot, you're not going to be counting that. So just make sure, because this was one of the things I never fully understood when I came in as a registrar. So and then I learned that my moderators didn't fully understand this. So I kind of I even have a whole instruction panel when you open up the back of the black bin saying, ballots in the write-in do not go through a second time. So you want to make sure that they're aware of that. Otherwise, there's been several towns in the last election, and it was the state Senate district in the 17th where one person went to bed the winner and woke up the next day actually having lost the election because the moderator were putting ballots through twice. They figured out the mistake late at night because they're going, well, why do we have so many ballots versus crossed off? They did a discrepancy recanvass, put them back through the tabulator. Lo and behold, there's your mistake. So it's something to keep on top of. The election management system, the EMS system. This information is here for you. I'm not going to go crazy into it because, like I stated earlier, the system is not working properly anyways. So, but what the system is, it's where you're going to put all your end and night returns in there. You're going to be able, you should be able to download head moderator returns and submit your information up that way. It's an online system. If you don't have credentials, you'll need to get those through the Secretary of State's office. The next few slides are going to talk about what things are. I'll go through them, but again, I don't want to go crazy because I'm waiting on, I think we're all waiting on a directive from the Secretary of State's office as to how we're going to go forward for August 9th. Right now, their plan is to use the system to do patchwork to get it up and running again. But should that not be the case, then we're going to I'll have to do it a different way, and we'll get those information, those things. But if we can get to the next slide.
What is the process for being notified that there's a primary? We know there's going to be one, but is it official yet? And who notifies us? At what point does it become official?
So we know that there's going to be a statewide for Dems and Republicans. We will be notified. You will be notified by the Secretary of State's office if there is a local primary. So if it's a district primary, or if it's municipal for state rep, state senate, or registrar, the Secretary of State's office will be sending out an email, and knowing the Secretary of State's office, we probably all will get the email telling us each district. They more than likely will not let you know individually. They'll probably just send a blanket one out instead of doing a piecemeal. So you will get that. The EMS setup, and this is kind of just so that you know, the primary, the actual election itself is put in by the Secretary of State's office. The offices assigned are put in by the Secretary of State's office. The candidates are added in by the Secretary of State's office. The certification of ballot order is going to be done by the town clerk and the registrar through there. Disregard this old email. I didn't realize that was still there. I don't believe this person still works with Secretary of State's office. I've used this class so many times, and sometimes a few things get past me. So this Jessica here, I don't believe still works there, so don't email her because she's not going to help you. Registrar of voters are, what their responsibilities are: assigning the polling places to the primary, adding or changing polling locations if necessary, assigning a head moderator to the primary, and you can assign moderators, data entry people if need be, and the passwords. You're in charge of all the passwords. Again, this Jessica person doesn't exist anymore. I do apologize. Head moderator return and moderator return. This is just the information that you're going to be doing with the system. I don't want to go crazy with this because I just don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to confuse anybody. So you're going to have access to this PowerPoint. Should everything stay the same, then you're just going to need to get your credentials from the Secretary of State's office, not email Jessica, and make sure, and you can follow the steps this way. But I know that right now the numbers are not tallying correctly in EMS. Polling places are having very difficulty being assigned and latching on to the election. Again, the Secretary of State's office is hoping that this is rectified before the end of this month. I don't know what's going to happen. So just be ready to have to do a different type of return.
Yep, and this presentation will be available on the ROVAC website. It was sent to our webmaster. It's going to be posted under the conference information, and this is just going to be a separate class. It'll be the new registrar class, spring 2022. You'll see this, and once we're done with the class and I get the ability, this video, the recording will be there as well.
Let's just keep going. I don't want to go through these.
Okay.
Okay, right here, recanvass. This is really important. You probably will not run into this year, but if you have a local primary, so you have a primary for state senate or state rep, you may end up having to do a recount. Recanvass is just a fancy word of saying recanvass or recount. So it can take, there's different ways it can happen. A recanvass of an election can take place if either the moderator or head moderator in the town can call for a recanvass of the machine counted ballots and or hand counted ballots and or absentee ballots and or write-in ballots if they determine that there's a discrepancy in the return. And that was the story I gave earlier. In Waterbury, we felt there was a discrepancy with our absentee ballots for our first batch for the first day. And we did find that. So we did it that way. The other way is, because remember, there's always an exception to the rule. So the exception to the rule is, or after an election or primary, when the plurality of the winning candidate for an office is 1/2 of 1% or less than 20 votes are separating both the winner and the defeated candidate for office. So if you have that, you're going to need to pull out the recanvass manual. You can go to the next page. And it gives you, if it's a statewide, which we have not had since 2010, and that actually was called off. The candidate themselves can call it off and say, you know what, I accept that I lost the election. There's no need to go forward. But if you don't hear from them, you need a date has to be put together. And one thing I need to, if the candidate is a statewide candidate, they need to inform the Secretary of State's office that they wish to not hold a recanvass. They're waiving their right. If it's a local town, so anything else, basically state rep, state senator, mayor, registrar, town clerk, they're going to be informing the town clerk that they're waiving their right to a recanvass. Municipal elections, I have one every municipal election. So this will more than likely be that. Hopefully you don't have this for state rep or state senate, but you could. So it's good to know what it is. All you're going to need to get, your head moderator is now in charge of putting this together. There's you need to give notice to poll workers. The recanvass officials are going to be the moderator, the registrars, at least 2 official checkers of opposing political parties, or in this case, in a primary, opposing sides. So if you have somebody running for state senate, you're going to have official checkers from that side. If you took poll workers that way, you need at least 2 ballot clerks, and you're going to need absentee counters that came in. And you're gonna go ahead and do that. You're gonna basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your backup machine, your backup memory cards, You're going to take your moderator returns, make sure your seals that were recorded are still the seals that are on. You're going to cut the seal, take the ballots out. You're going to inspect them in packets of 50, making sure if you see anything in there that you think the tabulator wouldn't have picked up, you're going to hand count. This is different than an audit. We're getting into audits in the next slide. This is an actual, you're recanvassing and recreating the election. Everything else that you think that's going to go through the tabulator perfectly is going to go right through the tabulator. If you want to hand count certain ones, you can hand count those instead of putting them through the tabulator. At that point, you're going to go ahead and put your enter card through and get your tape. Obviously, if you count your absentees at the polls, they're going to be all mixed in. They're going to be going through that way. If you do central counting, you're going to need to get those out and back as well. I do central counting, so I'm going to need to get my ballots for that district out and ready to go. And you're going to go through everything that you have. The one thing I want to be very clear on, and this is something that ROVAC and myself, it's been a quest of mine that I'm so far unsuccessful in. When you get done reading the manual was last updated, I think, in 2012. It says to file with the Secretary of State the certificate of recanvass, completion of recanvass. There is no such thing. I don't know why it says that. It says that. You're just going to send to the Secretary of State's office a new head moderator return. And that's going to be complete. That's going to be completing for you. My first recanvass, I was a nervous wreck. I was going through all this. We'd never done this. And I'm freaking out, trying to find all this information. And then I'm going, where is this certificate? Where is it? It doesn't, and somebody, one of the election officers who's since retired said, Tim, it doesn't exist. So don't freak out when you can't find it because it doesn't exist. Just send a new updated moderator return because you're going to do an amended return anyways. Because if it comes out the exact same, so nothing changes, then you don't need to do an amended return, but you do need to have a moderator return filed because you did the paperwork. So you're not gonna do an amended return, you're just gonna send up your return. Post-election audit is totally different. So after this election, this primary, 5% total, 5% of the polling places were going to be audited. And every polling place in the city, so I have 23 polling places, I'm going in 23 times. How many polling places you have determine how many times you go in to the lottery. It's a random lottery, and you end up when you end up getting pulled, they do it at the Secretary of State's office. UConn is the one that oversees it, and they're just scanning the ballots and showing it to you and looking for questionable audits. We're not auditing the results of the election like we were in a recount. We are auditing the actual election equipment. So it's different than actually, it wouldn't change the results. It wouldn't change the turnout, or excuse me, the results of an election, where the recount would. This is just, we're making sure that our election equipment actually counted what it said it counted. And this, you'll go in, you'll get a date to go up, you and your counterpart will drive up with your ballots. You put it through the machine, it's easy peasy, it's excellent. You have the right, if you want to do a manual. There is still a manual audit manual. If you have multiple offices, I really don't recommend doing it. You're adding human error in. If it's a small election, like I've had some elections where there's been less than 60 ballots. So yeah, I'm not going to drive to Hartford to do that. I'm going to do it locally. Remember, when you're doing an audit, regardless of where you're doing it, if you're doing it in town or you're doing it at the in Hartford, first off, if it's a state election, the Secretary of State's going to draw the offices being audited. If it's a municipal, your town clerk is going to be doing that. You need to notify the public where and when it's being held. So you can put it on your town website. You can put a sign in an elevator in your building. You can contact the newspaper, but it's up to you to notify the public where and when. And so next year for municipal, what I'll end up doing is, if I'm selected, I more than likely will have my town clerk do the local drawing for the 3 offices, pile it all into my Buick, drive it up to Hartford, and I will have notified on the city website that we're in Hartford doing an audit. The public is welcome to come. And that will suffice. If for this year, if I'm selected, the Secretary of State's office is gonna tell me what we're auditing. I'm gonna just put it on the website, put everything in the Buick and drive up. This last slides here are really just, and these are just hyperlinks, which are gonna help you where you're sitting. But these are where all the manuals are. So all of the manuals are for, for absentee counting. The ROVAC handbook is you're gonna find that on the rovac.org page. There's absentee counting, audit, recanvass, and moderator manuals, all on the Secretary of State's website, and you can find those under there. And this just tells you where you're gonna find everything. You have a few things I forgot. Like I said, LHS is the only one that you can use for your election tabulators and black boxes. Or when it comes to your ballots, you're only allowed to use LHS or Atkins and New Britain for printing. Because I've been asked numerous times by my alderman, well, why can't we go out to bid on this? And I'll say, well, the Secretary of State's office signed a contract. So our hands are tied. We have two options. You have option A or option B. One thing also to remember, because like I said, I've been doing this too long and there's stuff all in my head. So for a primary, which we're going into for polling for booths, voting booths, it's one for every 500 registered voters. And for the general election, it's gonna be one for every 250.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you can use less booths for a primary than you would for a general. So if you're, if you're in a pinch or you just don't, you don't want to set them all up, it's one for every 500 registered voters for August. When we go into November, it's going to be one for every 250. I believe we're done. Yes, we are done. So at this point, we'll do any more questions that are out there. I do prefer doing this in person.